Doing all right, but just a little bum for my Ikoria spoilers. Looks like we don't really have a lot for GDS, but we're gonna get more. We're gonna get more to that later on in the show, I bet.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that later. Yeah, GDS definitely didn't receive much support, but first off, I want to talk about the because we recorded on the Monday last week, so we missed the land cycle. They released the land cycle. It's like tri-lands, so you'll have like Sultai colors, Grixis colors.
No Grixis colors. It's all the wedge colors. So like Sultai, Mardu, Jeskai. So think no shard colors from the set Shards of Alara. It's like the Khan set. So the Khans took here in that era. So it's going to be like, yeah, Mardu, Sultai, Jeskai, and Abzan, I believe. Yeah, and Temur.
So Grixis yet again left out because we don't have any kind of canopy land. We don't get these kind of lands. But I want to ask you your opinion because I know you were really excited. You were texting me throughout the week. You're like, I can't wait to see the lands. I want to know what the lands are. And we talked about that back and forth. And then when you saw that what the lands were that were released, what were your initial thoughts?
I knew it. I knew it because I had my hopes way too high. And that same day when they got spoiled, I'm like, I need to check myself. When Wizards had that stream with, I think, Blake Rasmussen, I think his name is, and then the three other Wizards guys, Gavin Verhey, I think, is on there too. They were all like hyped and really like just hyping up the card. So I'm like, uh-oh, I know where this is going. Like, whenever Wizard says something like, oh my god, this card's amazing, and people have been asking it for years, I'm right away like, no, they haven't. Don't lie to me. Like, I immediately know that Wizards is notorious for just being like, yeah, sure, everyone wants this card, and they're like, here you go, and it's something we wanted. Or it's like, just like the Fetchland reprints. You know, they announced today, actually, Star City Games is retailing, or they announced you can pre-order the Fetchland set, the Secret Lair set. Do you want to guess how much they're going for?
There was something astronomical, weren't they?
When they won the professor's stream at Tolarian Community College, they said a little over 165, which was the Commander Anthology price. Do you want to guess how much they are now?
I'll say 200.
They are $350 right now in Star City Games. So 165 is expensive enough, right? That's a lot of money you're pushing out for land, or the 5 fetch lands, right? Now you're paying $350. You might as well go out and buy the playset of Scalding Tarns and a playset of like Polluted Deltas and call it a day, because that is way too much money. And so back to the Tri-lands, I saw it and I was like, oh, cool. I mean, like, I was just bummed because I don't see this being played anywhere in Modern besides maybe as a one of. I was discussing with you right now, or a couple minutes ago before we started the podcast, that Astrolabe is so freaking good right now that why would you even need a random land that taps for 3 colors? Like, I had this Astrolabe that can turn my mana into anything. It can even turn into colors that I don't have. If I want to make a random black member or a black mana to pay for Dismember or something out of my sideboard, I can in a Temur deck or something, you know, like, it's crazy how good Astrolabe is. So I feel like this random cycling land is like, okay, cool. You know, like, I think it's going to see very heavy play in Pioneer, especially in the 3 color decks in that format. The only fetch land they have access to is Fabled Passage. So having a land that they're able to top deck, or having the opening hand that taps for all 3 colors that can also be cycled away, is a huge upside, especially in that format, because you really don't have access to the mana bases that we have in Modern. Commander, it's going to be a shoe-in to any of the wedge color decks. I mean, why not? It taps for all 3 colors and it cycles. Like, why wouldn't it be? I just don't. In Modern, there's so many other things that you could be doing. And the decks that can only afford to do this are the slower decks but even then, they want to do a turn 1 Astrolabe or a turn 1 Serum Visions or an Opt or, man up for a Spell Snare or Mystical Dispute. So them taking a turn off is kind of a big deal too. So I don't see it for going anywhere besides as a one of, and I don't know. Like I don't know what I was thinking, getting my hopes up to be like, oh my god, we're gonna get another rare land cycle. It's gonna be so amazing. I am like you. I said to myself, you stupid idiot, you should have known you were going to be disappointed. Like, why do you sit there and hope that Wizards is going to make some playable lands for you? Like, no, they're not. They're going to make this fringe playable thing and then call it a day and hype it up on stream. That's it. Like, they don't care about you. And I'm sorry. I'm being very, very depressing at the moment. I apologize to our audience. I am just feeling a little bitter today, but I'll let Jeremy take it from here. What do you think, Jeremy? What do you think about these tricolor lands?
Yeah, so when I first saw them, I think you sent them to me, and I looked at it, opened up the picture, and I saw the pictures in the lands. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This is what we get. And of course, just like I thought that all the colors got them, I'm stupid here and didn't realize that, like, even again, like you get Sultai colors, you get all these other colors, but you don't get Grixis. Not saying that we would even try this in Grixis. It could be a possibility. I really don't see it. But again, it just seems like they're kind of catering to certain colors, because I was really hoping for a finished set of those Canopy lands, because like Mardu with Silent Clearing, it's a very good card in there, and you could sit there and just ping yourself and control your life loss, which is really nice. And then
then draw a card when you need to.
Exactly. When you start to flood, you can go ahead and sacrifice that, draw a card. So I'm like, man, Grixis could desperately use that a lot, and because we can't find our threat. So another card to possibly control our life loss and dig deeper to find it. I'm like, that'd be really cool. And then I open up this picture. I'm like, wow, what a disappointment. And like you said, I think it's a shoe-in for Commander. If I was really heavy into Commander, like we play every once in a while. We're not really competitive. We just do it every once in a while when we have friends over.
Yeah.
And I would definitely play these in Commander. If I was Commander centric, I'd be like, oh yeah, like this is awesome. Like I really love these lands. But since I'm modern, I'm looking at it just like, I agree heavily with your point about Astrolabe. It's like Astrolabe comes in, taps for any mana you want. On top of that, draws a card. As long as you have a Snow Island, you're going to play Astrolabe, and then you can use it for green, you can use it for red, you can use it for black, purple, yellow, orange, whatever you want. And then, like, you get these land cycles. It comes in tapped, which it would be extremely powerful if it was 3 mana and came out untapped. So I don't blame them for making a tapped land. But it's like, why would I play this? Because I might as well just play Erosa, because I can do Astrolabe and draw a card off of it instead of fetching for this, playing it tapped, and then kind of playing the slow game. So possibly I could see it as a one of in some decks. I really don't foresee it having a whole lot of impact in Modern right now. For Commander, yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be pretty good land cards for Commander. Even as like a casual as I am, I could see that it looks pretty good in Commander. But yeah, Modern, as soon as I saw it, I was quite disappointed, just like you were. I was like, this is really what we're going to get. Again, just Grixis just kind of gets pushed under the rug a little bit, but
all the short colors, really.
Basically. So yeah, the lands were definitely a disappointment. Like I said, I don't think they'll have a huge effect on Modern, because Astrolabe is just so huge right now.
I will say that I do love the art they did with the alternate art versions of the lands. Those are beautiful. Wow, like I really am glad Wizards is doing this really cool like alternate art vibe. Like it just looks awesome. Looks like something out of like, video game concept art. Like I really fell in love with like the design of it. Like I'll be picking up some lands just for my Commander decks because it looks so cool. And they're very practical. But I don't foresee this being heavily played Modern. My dream scenario was it was going to be like a land that it comes in untapped if you pay 3 life. So basically a life per color, like a shock land, but a bolt land. Like if they did that, oh my God, 4-color Shadow would be insane. It would just be the best Shadow deck because you have all your colors turn 1, and then you're able to, splash easily with a Blood Crypt or whatever you want, really. And then you're playing this. 4-color Shadow would be fantastic if we had those lands. But we had those lands slightly, only they come and tap and cycle for 3. I thought it would have been funny, though, like how you said, What if they came in untapped and they were basically just better dual lands and they tapped for 3? How
That'd be
big of a
insane.
finger would that be to the reserve list? Like, oh, you know, like, yeah, we can't print dual lands ever again. You're right. Sorry, Legacy. We understand. But oh, here's this this land that taps for 3 colors. Yeah, here's tri-lands. I would love to, I would play. For those of you who don't know, I love Legacy. I think it's a fantastic format. It's a format I've always wanted to get into, but because of a lot of the most competitive decks cost like as much as a used car, I normally cannot get into it. Besides playing UB Shadow, which is fine. I love Blue Black Death Shadow. It's one of my favorite decks. But besides playing that, I can't really play anything else, mostly because everything else is super expensive. So if they came out with tri-lands, oh my gosh, I would love that. But back to Jeremy was saying, I know you mentioned the new Simic Human, correct?
Yeah, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. Now, Kinder Bonder Prodigy, Simic colors yet again, if that's a surprise to you. So it's a legendary creature, human druid. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. It also has a second ability where you tap 5 generic green and a blue. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of the library in any order. So as soon as this was spoiled, I saw a lot of people like, here we go, Simic with another great card. And I thought it was at face value, it looks pretty broken, but I don't know if it's like super broken. I think it could be a pretty strong card in Modern, but I don't think it's going to be like the next Oko or anything. So what do you think about Kinder Bonder Prodigy?
Well, I agree with your statement. I think it looks pretty broken on the surface. It's certainly busted in Commander. It's a turn 2 commander that basically makes your Soul Ring tap for 3 and your Basalt Monolith tap for like infinite or something. Like it's pretty insane when it comes to that format. But as far as Modern goes, the Simic list right now, or the Teamer list, or the Sultai list, basically the Euro decks, they're a very tight list, and they really can't afford to splash for a random creature because it might double their Astrolabe mana or something. Their list is pretty centric on a certain number of cards, and a certain number of interactions are limited to. That's why they're able to do so good in most matchups, because they have this super tight list with all these great cards. So I don't know where you would fit this in. Maybe it's like a one of, or maybe 2 if you really are dedicated to drawing into it. But I don't see it beyond that right as of now. Not saying that it couldn't be broken in the next couple of months, because
I agree.
It's a Simic card that could be busted, basically. You know, like it's in Simic colors. We've had Oko, we've had Euro. Like, there's not a doubt in my mind that this could be the next broken card. It just takes some people who are much smarter than me to figure out how to break it, you know. So I think that eventually we could see it broken, but as of right now, I don't think it's that much of a problem. Also, it's a 2/2. It's only 2 CMC, so even non-revolt fatal push can kill it. It's only 2 toughness, so you know the backside of Culligan's command can hit it. You know, like, it's a very killable threat, killable creature. You know, which I appreciate. Like, at least, yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Like, it is tons of value. It is a really cool card, but I think it is, you know, dare I say, balanced, because it's such a small threat that's easily killable, and it's, you know, it's a human too, so even a 2 Plague Engineers on board can kill it, or a Plague Engineer plus a Liliana tick up from the Last Hope or something like that. Like, it's not unbeatable. Bolt kills it, like anything removal base kills it, Disfigure even. So I don't think it's terrible on that level of it. Like, I'm glad it wasn't like, you know, a 2 mana 1/4 or something, or a 2 mana 1/3, or, you know, something absurd. But I like it though. I think it's a cool card. I think it will see play eventually. I just don't know where. And yeah, but of course, Simic colors.
Yeah, I think that was an important point to bring up. I think Wizards was smart at making it a 2/2, because right now Veil of Summer is a very powerful card in this format. Just being able to, you know, like, basically fizzle out fatal pushes and all of the removal that we depend upon. We've kind of had to make a switch some of these decks to try to play lightning bolts to the side, or maybe try to put some in the main, or like Burn obviously plays lightning bolts. So I do think it's smart that they put it as a 2/2, because like, they might be playing Veil of Summer and they're going to push out your fatal push, no pun intended, but being able to allow it to be lightning bolt or bolted in this meta is very good. I do appreciate that they kind of took that in mind. I don't know if they really thought about that when they made it, but I do appreciate that it's a 2/2 that can be bolted because Veil of Summer is still such a powerful card in this format. So yeah, I definitely think it could be interesting. I know people are going to try to brew with it, and I love when people try to brew with stuff because, like you said, they're smarter than I am when it comes to building decks. I can definitely foresee this becoming an extremely powerful card in the format, becoming another like Urza or becoming another Uro.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, I definitely don't think it's on that level. Now, there's some other cards I do want to talk about. First off, I've seen a lot of Hardened Scales players get really excited for this. And this was the printing of the Ozolith. Now, this is a artifact. It's a 1-mana artifact, legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto a target creature. Obviously, when Opal got hit, that hurt Hardened Scales Affinity pretty bad. And I think that players of Hardened Scales and all that are kind of excited to try this out to see if it kind of mitigates the effect of the Opal banning on them. What are your overall thoughts of the Ozolith from Ikoria?
So I think it's a super cool artifact. Like you said, the Hardened Scale players got hit pretty hard when the Opal ban hit them. Like, a lot of the Scales players were, Infinity players, and they were looking for another deck to fill that void, and Hardened Scales was the perfect fit for them. You can go so many ways you can kill someone. You can go with, a big Ballista, a huge Arcman Ravager, or a big Hairback Walker, or a Go Wide strategy. It was a really cool deck. And seeing it, taken out of the meta kind of made me sad a bit too, because it was a really cool deck to play against and, super unique, tons of math too involved. But as far as this artifact's concerning, I don't know if it's like the savior they're thinking it's going to be. I still think that it's not like it's the reason why in Hardened Scales had that, really big takeoff sometimes is because they had those insane starts with Mox Opal. And that's what allowed them to really go off those first couple turns. That being said, though, I think Ozolith is a really unique factor into these decks. And I really hope that Hardened Scales does make a comeback with this. It'd be super cool to see Hardened Scales back on top or back somewhere in the meta. I think that it's really good removal insurance because normally if you have an Arcman Ravager and you have I forgot what the little 1/1 construct guy or 2-mana construct guy that has modular or any artifact with all their counters on it. If I know you have the Arcman Ravager, I'm going to kill that first because I know that's where you're going to put all those counters to. This adds another element to it by putting that, artifact on the battlefield where I have to worry about destroying that as well as your Arcman Ravager because it's going to go to at least one of the counters. And as soon as you get your artifact on the board, you can just transfer those counters right back to a Hang-Up Walker, a Ballista, another Arcman Ravager, whatever artifact you want to, even an Ink Moth Nexus. So I think it's really cool that it really makes removal, which was super good against their deck, kind of a little harder. And if it's not like a double removal spell, one for the Ravager and then one for the artifact, I think it's gonna line up pretty poorly for the opponent. So I think it's a super cool card. I'm looking forward to seeing players try it. Like I said, I think it's really good insurance against removal heavy decks like Jund, even Grixis Death Shadow, or the blue-white controllers with tons of Path to Exiles and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see where it's going to go. I think it's a cool deck. I'm looking forward to seeing it back in the meta somewhere. What about you, Jeremy? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I don't think Hardened Scales was a good deck, and it was one of the top decks in the meta at its peak. I don't think that this will take it back to those glory days of being one of the top decks in the format, but for people that are really diehards of Affinity, diehards of Hardened Scales, this gives them the opportunity to kind of brew and try to salvage what's left. I think ultimately the Mox Opal ban just kind of killed its chances of being a really good deck in the format. I think it still has potential to be a good deck in the format. There's so many fringe decks that are really good. And I think this could be one of them. I don't think it'll be like the Yoroza or the new Bant Snow or anything, but I definitely think it could have a place in these decks. I really did think it was a cool deck, even though I hated playing against it as a GDS player because it was always just a hard fight to try to be able to defeat it, and you had to think about all their different lines and all that math, and it was really hard. And it was really cool to see the deck in action. I really enjoyed playing against these people that played these decks. Normally the people that I played against that were Hardened Scales or Affinity, they were really cool to play against. They're always super excited to talk about their decks, talk about like all the cards that they bought for it. So it definitely sucks to see Mox Opal get banned a while back to kind of kill this deck. And I think this card does give them a little bit of like a glimmer of hope. Like I said, I don't think it'll bring back this deck as like one of the top decks, but I definitely think it could be something that they experiment with that could end up just kind of bringing it back a little bit. It won't be the powerful deck it once was, but this gives them a little bit of glimmer of hope, I do believe. So moving on, this card I wanted to talk about because I thought it was really cool. Sprite Dragon. Now there's something unique about it that is the reason why I wanted to talk about it. It's blue-red. Is it based? It has flying and haste, which is hard to deal with. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sprite Dragon. Now, there was no pause in there. It does not say until end of turn, which that is the unique part that I really want to talk about. I do like that can get out of hand easily. Like they left it so it could be Fatal Push without Revolted, which is nice because they could add up these counters insanely quick. You add that, you combine that with the Manamorphose, and Manamorphose gets out of hand quickly in these Izzet builds. And I think this would be really cool if Arclight Phoenix was still a popular deck. I don't know if this will really be like the next broken card of Modern. I don't foresee that. I could see this card possibly in like an Izzet Delver Secrets deck, because Izzet Delver Secrets deck, like it's a cool deck and all that, and I like it. I wish I could play it because Delver Secrets is so cool, but it's such an inconsistent card.
Especially in Modern.
Exactly. You can go turns without it flipping, and then by the time you do flip, they're like, okay, Fatal Push, Path to Exile, get rid of your 3/2. So I do think that this could be kind of interesting in those kind of builds. It gives them another win con, because all times we're playing like Terramander and stuff. I think Sprite Dragon will be cool because they play a lot of counters. They can play Manamorphose. There's a lot of spells that they're going to play because they need a lot of spells to play Delver of Secrets. So I don't think that, like I said, I don't think this will be the next deck to beat, but it could be cool to at least try out in Sprite Dragon. What are your thoughts about Sprite Dragon?
I think it's super cool, and I know I'm saying that's my catchphrase today, thinking on this card is super cool. But I really like the card because, like you said, like it seems like one of those cards that have those pseudo prowess ability. Like, oh, okay, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, right? Oh no, the counters stay. Like, okay, wow, that's cool. Like you can have a turn go off, and then all of a sudden you have it till you have it next turn to hang back on blocking or swing again. I think the crazy thing about Kiln Fiend, right? It's one of my favorite cards, and you know that one of your favorite cards too. Is you can make this humongous Kill Fiend. You get in a hit, but it's not quite enough to kill them. But you need to get it in, otherwise you have the purpose of your Kill Fiend die next turn or the turn after. But if that Kill Fiend stayed huge, you can possibly finish the game a lot quicker and even hold it back on defense when you need to. And it'll be a substantial blocker. Like they'll think twice about attacking into it. You know, it's not just a puny 1/2. So as far as Sprite Dragon goes, I feel like it's in that same category. It fits perfectly into these Izzet like prowess lists that run a Manamorphose, Gut Shot, Lava Darts, and stuff like that. I can even see Mono Red Prowess turning into like an Izzet Prowess deck with like a splash of blue, maybe for like this, or maybe like a Thing in the Ice or something along those lines. I really like the card, and I think it's pretty cool, and I can also see it doing pretty well in Pioneer as well, just because you're able to get it out and then maybe, you know, do a bunch of ops or whatever cantrips like Anticipate, Discovery, Dispersal, and then put some counters on it and fly through. The haste is really huge. It's just a better Stormcast or Storm Chaser mage, because, you know, that for the longest time was a 2-mana 1/3 with prowess and flying and haste, and that was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. You know, Flying Wizard, I loved it. But the fact that this gets +1/+1 and it doesn't leave at the end of the turn, I think is super cool, and it's really an awesome card. And I share your same sentiments about a Delver too. I love Delver. It's one of my favorite cards, but in Modern, we don't have the access to the cards like Ponder, Preordain, and Portent and stuff like that, which allows them to really flip their Delver and control the top of their library so well. We don't have that luxury. We have to rely on Serum Visions as basically our best cantrip, and that does not go well with Delver at all, because the scry or the draw card is really detrimental to before the scrying, because we want it to be Preordain basically. If it was Preordain, I feel like Delver could be a legit deck, but as of now, it's not, because of Serum Visions, and we lack a lot of the great cantrips Legacy has. So yeah, I think Sprite Dragon's a really cool card. I'm looking forward to playtesting it, and I think it'd be a really interesting card to play around with, especially like I said, maybe like an Is It Prowess list, or like I know they used to have those Suicide Blue decks with like Kill Fiend and Thick in the Ice. Maybe you can swap this in for Kill Fiend, or perhaps run both of them, or this is a 2 of. So I'm looking forward to it coming out. And I like the alternate art too that features one of the Godzilla monsters. So I'm looking forward to definitely playing around with this card.
Like I said, I think it could be interesting in those kind of builds, but the only problem that's going to keep these builds really down there is Archmage's Charm.
Yeah.
Because you can do all your work to flip Delver's Secrets, and they're like, all right, I'm going to gain control of that. Thank you for a 3-2 flyer.
Which is very depressing since your Rose is playing like 3 copies of that
exactly.
thing too. Archmage's Charm.
It's a very hard card to deal with when you're playing a lot of 1-mana cards as well. So the last card I want to talk about is something for the Shadow world, possibly. So I want to ask about Lurrus of the Dream Den. Lurrus of the Dream Den, legendary creature, 1 generic, and then it has white, black as the hybrid mana. Has companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. Lifelink, and during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. So first, I want to ask, what are your thoughts on Lurrus of the Dream Den? And then we'll kind of go into looking at Grixis, looking at 4-color Shadow, Mardu, and Jund, and seeing if Lurrus could fit in there.
Okay, so I think Lurrus is a neat card. I think it's, playable maybe in some like fringe Mardu Pyromancer decks. I think it's cool design. I like the companion mechanic. I like the 2 or less, the thought of casting baubles for free out of your graveyard each every turn seems like a really nice repeatable Snapcaster Mage type effect. So yeah, there's not much to say on that front, but I do have a lot to say on the Shadow part. So I'll let you say what you think about your first initial thoughts of the card before we deep dive into it in Shadow and stuff like that.
Like you said, yeah, I think it's a really cool card. This companion mechanic seems pretty good. Definitely looks really good in Commander. We already had a card that they released that are like, nah, we're going to ban that in Commander already because it seems so powerful. So Companion definitely has the probability of being really good. Like I said, I think it's a cool card. It's a 3-2 lifelink, and really the most powerful part is during each of your turns, you may cast that 1 permanent spell with mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. Modern's all about being cost efficient, playing cheap spells, unless you're like Control, obviously, then you're playing bigger mana spells, but a lot of smaller mana decks, they want to be able to play a bunch of cost-efficient spells for 1 mana, 2 mana. So it's like, oh wow, at the surface, I'll be able to play something from my graveyard for free, really? Like that does, or not for free, obviously, but like being able to utilize your graveyard as well as your hand, as well as your library is just another powerful thing. So those are my initial thoughts. Let's go ahead. I'm going to pass it to you. Let's go ahead and talk about this in the Shadow archetypes world, because we've seen a lot of people try to talk about this in Shadow.
Please do not play this in Shadow. I will say that right now. And this is something I won't go back on. Especially with, I have a reputation now. I feel like I'm going back on my word every damn time. Like I did it with Serum Visions, I did it with Karosa. But Lurrus is the one thing I do not think I'm going to go back on, for the sole fact to play this card with the companion mechanic, you have to take out Street Wraith, which I do not think is a good idea. Street Wraith is probably one of the linchpins of Shadow. I would argue Street Wraith is just as important as the fetch lands. Like, it's so important to the deck. Like, I don't think, like, the games with when you have Street Wraith in your hand and when you don't have Street Wraith in your hand are like day and night. Like, I know Magic Age is a really fun video that showed him playing, I think it was like a 4-color build without Street Wraith, and he said, oh, it's not an aggro deck, or I don't like it in aggro matchup, so it's fine. Okay, cool, like, I guess. But I mean, like, it's such a pinnacle to the deck. Like, I can just think of so many times where I'm like, they try to go and bolt my Shadow and I have Ferocious, and I just cycle it and it gets +2/+2, or I have that one extra card for the Gurmag Angler to be pumped out. It's just such a key card to the deck, and I don't think removing it is a good idea at all. I think it's a silly, I think Lurrus is a classic case of we're looking desperately for anything into Shadow for this new set because we just want something so badly. And we're looking at cards that just don't belong yet. Like, for God's sakes, it has lifelink. Like, you can't even use, like, it's a 3-mana enchantment that can be shocked, for God's sakes, or Culligan's Command. Like, it's not going to be, it's not good in Shadow decks. I don't think it's going to be good. I just think that taking out Street Wraith is too much of a big cost that we would have to pay to get the companion mechanic going. And I don't know. I am all for experimentations. I'm all for trying new cards. But this card, it just doesn't line up with what Shadow wants to do. And it's to take out one of the linchpins to the deck. And I think it's super important to have Street Wraith in the deck. Like I said, I think like fetch lands and Street Wraith are some of the easiest ways to fill that graveyard, along with Mishra's Bauble. And removing Street Wraith from that equation just makes the deck so much slower on so many levels. And I feel like it's just, I know it's only 4 cards, but it's just not going to vibe well with the whole entire deck. I understand that some people want to try it. I say, go ahead, more power to you. But in my personal opinion, I don't think it will work out. But again, don't let me stop you from having fun. If you're having fun with that deck and you want to play it, and you want to buy, your full art or full extended art, like, go ahead. Like, I'm not going to stop you. It's your deck. You play what you want. But me personally, I'm going to take a hard pass on it. I don't think it's going to be good. It has lifelink. It's a 3/2, and you have to take out Street Wraith to play it with the companion mechanic. So that's it for me on the lowest card. What about you, Jeremy? What do you think?
So before I answer, I just want to ask a quick question. Do you think it could fit in any type of Shadow build? Either Jund, Mardu, 4-color Grix has taken all those into consideration. Are you saying, do you think it could fit in any of those?
Nope. Because if the Shadow decks have to run Street Wraith, and in order to run lowers to its full power, you have to take Street Wraith out. So I don't think it'd be practical. So what about you, Jeremy?
So I'm going to go back a little bit to what you talked about. That we kind of go back on our takes here. So we did say we have gone back a little bit on Serum Visions. We were trying to play Serum Visions in the deck. I think it does help us become a little bit more consistent, but Serum Visions is not the saving grace for this deck. It is not made Grixis that much better. It makes it a little bit more consistent, but it does not make it. It's not like the godsend that we needed. So in our case, we did go back in a little bit, but our overall opinion was that Serum Vision just wasn't a good card for Grixis Death Shadow, and I really don't think it's that great of a card. It just helps our deck become a little less inconsistent. And then as far as the Kroxa take, people are still trying to use Kroxa and all that, but a lot of the results that I see on MTG Goldfish are the old Snapcaster days. So while we did try to jam Kroxa as well, I think we were still ultimately right that Kroxa can help the deck as well. It's kind of like a Serum Visions. Like, it could help the deck, but it ultimately is not the godsend that people thought it might be. So I just want to come back with that a little bit because, like I said, MTG Goldfish, any results that I've seen since Kroxa, we started jamming Kroxa in there, I've never seen one Kroxa in any of the Grixis Death Shadow decks. So I definitely did think that was interesting. As far as Lurrus and Shadow, I agree with you. It's just, like, as soon as I saw Lifelink, I'm like, there's no way Shadow can play this. You're telling me that I got to pay 3 mana for a card that I literally cannot do anything else with. I can't block, I can't attack because all the damage that I'm doing myself to try to play Shadow is just going to be mitigated. The fetch shock means nothing. I don't think that's really good. I mean, in some small scenarios, it might be good to attack with it and gain a little bit of life because we're at 3 life or something and we're in danger of a bolt or something, Galvanic Blast. In those scenarios, then yeah, Lurrus would be pretty nice to be able to gain a little bit of life, but it just doesn't make sense in Shadow builds. Like you said, cutting Street Wraith, it leads to nutty turn 2 Gurmag Anglers for Grixis Death Shadow. It's just basically a staple. I know sometimes you do side it out, so you're like, well, if I side it out, why wouldn't I just cut it completely for Lurrus? Those words on Lurrus are really enticing, being able to play things from the graveyard. Like 4-color Shadow, I could play Tarmogoyf from the graveyard, I could play Death Shadow, but ultimately it's just such a wombo. Like I said, I can't block with it, I can't attack with it, because I really don't want to be gaining life in a deck that's whole purpose is to lose life. Now in Grixis Death Shadow, not only are you losing Street Wraith, but you're losing the Royal Scions in the main board, and that has become at least like a staple of a 1-of in the main board, because that costs 3 mana. This deck says 2 or less. So yeah, you're losing Street Wraith, you're losing essentially 5 cards to play a card that's kind of a wombo that has lifelink. Like, yeah, it would be cool to be able to bring things back from the graveyard, but I just don't foresee that being powerful enough to warrant playing Lurrus. Like, I get it, because spoiler season is such an exciting time. There's so many cards we look at like, I need to try this. I want to try this. This could be good in this. And then we try it and we're like, okay, well, that didn't really pan out. And I think Luris is going to be another case of this, that we're really trying it. Okay, we're trying it and it's not panning out. And didn't make Shadow much better. Shadow's in a position right now where it's just like Grixis especially is really just not that good right now because we're struggling. We can't find threats, and this doesn't really help us find threats unless it's in the graveyard. And then it's not a threat in itself because it's a 3/2 that basically shrinks our Death Shadow whenever we try to do anything with it. So I completely agree with you. I don't think it's that strong. I don't think it'll pan out in any of the Shadow archetypes. It'll be cool to try it, I guess. More power to people. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to work. I think this is a take right here that is we're going to look back on and be like, okay, yeah, we're right. Like I said, we went back a little bit on Serum Visions, but ultimately, while we're playing it, it's still not that great of a card in this deck. It just helps it become a little bit more consistent, but it hasn't fixed any of our problems. Kroxa hasn't fixed any of our problems, so please don't look at Luris to fix our problems because it will not fix any of our problems.
I agree fully. I just think that Luris is a classic case of like, oh my god, this card got spoiled. I need to try it. And then you like sit back for a second. You're like, hang on a second. Maybe Lifelink and taking on Street Wraith and Shadow decks is not a good idea. It's like in waves. Like, okay, yeah, it's not a good idea at all. So yeah, I don't think Luris is going to be good in Shadow whatsoever. Like I said, I think it'd be really cool, like in a Mardu type, like a Mardu Pyromancer type deck, or Mardu Stoneblade. I know is a deck people like to play at like FNM level and or go out and play in smaller tournaments with, or even the big tournaments. But as far as Shadow decks are concerned, no Luris for me.
And does Luris affect sideboard cards as well? Because it says each permanent card in your starting deck. Does that mean your main board? Does that mean your sideboard too?
It means your sideboard as well. Also, like you have to take up a spot for Luris to go into your sideboard. Like it takes up a sideboard spot. It doesn't magically make your sideboard 16 cards. You have to make Luris now a sideboard slot, which in Modern is a huge thing. You have 15 cards to fight like 20, 30 decks all in the meta. And then you have to account for that one guy who comes to your FNM with like a mono green stompy deck, and who's always there, and you have to at least something because you're going to face him. Like always be prepared for whatever deck. So a lot of times in Modern, you have to have all these catch-all cards in the sideboard, especially if you're going to a tournament where the meta is undeveloped, or the local scene's undeveloped, or you don't know it. Having those catch-all spells is very important, and Luris just completely shaving one of those spots kind of hurts in my opinion. And it's a 3/2 lifelink that you can cast from your sideboard. Whoopee, I don't think that's the best thing in the world. It's certainly not like Karn, Mycosynth Lattice levels. Like they were able to tweak their sideboards to all those one of artifacts because Karn acted like as a straight up demonic tutor that can go grab anything they needed. Aggressive deck. Okay, I'm gonna go grab the Snare Bridge. Oh, this is like a storm deck. Okay, I'm gonna grab a Chalice of Void. Okay, time to lock the game out. I'm gonna grab Mycosynth Lattice. Like that's why Karn works so well with the whole sideboard mechanic stuff. But I do not think that Luris and the companion mechanic in general has that much of effect in Modern where it might have in other formats, especially in like formats like Commander.
Since it affects the sideboard too, I think that makes it even worse that I didn't even realize that, because not only do you have to cut Street Wraith, like I said, you would have to cut the Royal Scions in the main board. A lot of people playing sideboard the Royal Scions, or playing sideboard Ashiok Dreamrender, sideboard Liliana the Last Hope, sideboard Plague Engineer. You can't play any of these decks because they cost more than 2 mana then.
Yeah, Plague Engineer 2 is huge. Ashiok is fantastic in Shadow decks. Like these cards are sideboard staples that we're no longer allowed to play. We're vastly limited in, or Liliana, like Last Hope, or the Veil. Like those cards are fantastic, and removing them really hurts.
And Gurmag Angler, but I don't think...
Yeah, Gurmag Angler too.
And Grixis would play this even less because, like, I'm looking at my list. I'm like, why would I even consider this? Because I would, like I said, I would lose 4 Street Wraith, 4 Gurmag Angler, 2 Royal Scions, Liliana the Last Hope, 2 Plague Engineer to try to play this card. That's such a complete wombo in this deck. So yeah, if you're on Grixis, please don't even consider this card because you're losing so much value to play a card that has so little value. Those last words definitely do have value, being able to play something from your graveyard, but is it really worth losing, what is that, like 12, 13 cards to play these cards.
It's not that impactful, I think, compared to like what we could be doing. I think that it's a cool idea in theory, but when you put it into practice, it kind of just falls apart.
So yeah, I agree. I don't foresee really any of the Shadow style decks to playing this. Grixis, please, for the love of God, don't even attempt this. 4-color Shadow, I think maybe, but at the same time, I just don't foresee really any of these. I don't think it'll be good enough to really warrant a bunch of spots to really bring Shadow back into the meta, because right now it's really not in the meta that well. I guess Jund Shadow, like all you would lose is Street Wraith. Some of them play like Hooting Mandrills and Clothis, God of Destiny in the sideboard, so you lose those cards. So you really have to look at your deck and be like, is Lurrus replacing these cards? The cards that I'm losing, is Lurrus better than what I have in my main board, what I have in my sideboard? You really need to consider that, because while it could be powerful, you could have the possibility of playing Death Shadow, Tarmogoyf, Monastery, Swift Spear from the graveyard. Is it really worth losing all the cards just for that? And it's a possibility that you might not even play this card, or it gets pushed right away or bolted or whatever. And then so you lose all this value for a card that just dies right away.
Yeah, I agree. But on a lighter note, I think we do have some cards to talk about that actually can go into Shadow decks and might be a fun time to experiment with. Jeremy, do you have any cards that you want to talk about in Ikoria that you think could possibly go in?
So we talked a little bit on the last podcast. I definitely think I'm primarily a Grixis player, so I'm sorry if some of the other ones, like Jund, 4-color Shadow, Mardu, feel a little like left out. But when I'm looking at cards, I'm looking at, will this fit in Grixis? And then will this fit in Shadows, like the afterthought? Not like the afterthought, but it's like the second thought in my head, because I'm trying to make Grixis better. I want to be able to play Grixis. We talked about it a little bit on the other podcast. Footfall Crater could be a possibility.
For sure.
Like I said on the last podcast, that haste is a really powerful part that some people might be overlooking. I know we're looking at the trample part. Like, yes, like let's have something else that Shadow could overpower, Tarmogoyf could overpower, but being able to give something haste is something that can quicken this deck a little bit, because this deck struggles a little bit, because once we start to get turn 3, turn 4, we're starting to see turn 3 Euro. While they can't escape it yet, they're already gaining 3 life, drawing a card, putting another land, they're ramping. Turn 4, they're going to be able to escape Euro, and then in 2 turns they gained 6 life, drew 2 cards, put 2 extra lands in the battlefield. Now they have a 6/6, and the Shadow that we played next turn is looking pretty bad. Or we could take the damage and make Shadow bigger, but like you get where I'm trying to go at this point. I like the Gurmag Angler, the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, for sure. They drown us in value pretty much.
Exactly. And the cards that they're escaping might shrink Tarmogoyf, so I'm thinking about that. So being able to try to attack quicker, attack with more damage before they're able to set up their game plan seems really prevalent, seems really good. And not only is Footfall Crater trample or haste, it's trample and haste, which I think is really powerful as well. I think you said it before, the cycling for 1 is kind of what makes this even more playable, because TBR can be a really dead card sometimes. So like we're sitting with our hand, like great, we have no threat, but I can't go find anything. Now, if we already have one on the battlefield, or we're really in desperation mode, we're able to cycle this Footfall Crater, draw a card to try to dig deeper and find what we really need to find. So I do appreciate this card. I definitely would like to test it. I think it could be interesting in there. I haven't really thought about it too deep about what I would try to cut to play it. But for at least for Grixis, I think Grixis players are kind of interested in trying this. We're at a weird spot with Grixis. Grixis really isn't that good. Out of the 4 Shadow archetypes, I would put it at 4th. The ones that we mentioned before. What about you? What do you think other than Footfall Crater? Are there anything that you saw in Ikoria that'd be like, okay, I'd be interested in testing this in Shadow?
Yeah, I'm really interested in Call of the Death Dweller. It's 2 generic, 1 black for a sorcery. It says return up to 2 target creature cards with total converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a death touch counter on either of them, then put a menace counter on either of them. So basically, return up to 2 creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield and put some really good keyword abilities on them, like death touch or menace, which I think can be huge. Like giving 2 Death Shadows Menace or Death Touch can be like the difference between life and death. Like if they have like a huge Euro and our Death Shadows are only 4/4s, giving it Death Touch, can be a really good thing. Or giving them both Menace so they can swing in. Often these Euro decks are kind of like us. Like they have one big creature, aka Euro, and that's their whole protect the queen strategy. Granted they might have like a Gilded Goose or perhaps a Urza. But hopefully we've been killing those threats, and Euro is the biggest threat that we can't deal with. But with this, we're able to kind of eke out that final advantage by giving our stuff like Menace, which is like a pseudo form of blockability, and we just swing in for the win, or Death Touch if we need them to be on combat duty or blocking, so to speak, not combat, but blocking. So I think it's a cool card. It's 3 mana. Which is kind of the limit for GDS. Also, I was thinking that it's cool because like we have 4 Thought Scours in a deck, and nothing feels more depressing than Thought Scouring one of our threats, like the Death Shadow, or like a Death Shadow right into the graveyard, and then it's gone forever. Previously we have Culligan's Command to go grab that threat and bring it right back to our hand. But Call of the Death Dweller might be a little better because it can be. It can grab 2 shadows, or it can possibly grab back a, Death Shadow and a Snapcaster Mage. And when Snapcaster enters the battlefield, everyone knows it has a fantastic flashback ability that triggers. So you can, flashback a Fatal Push, or maybe a Server Visions, or a Thoughtseize, or Inquisition, or Stubborn Denial, or not Stubborn Denial, a Thought Scour. So like it has a lot of playability, I think, and I would be interested in testing 1 to 2 of these and see where it goes. I think 4-Color Shadow could even use it even better than us because they have Goyf as their secondary main threat. So they're able to return, Death Shadow or a Tarmogoyf to the battlefield. So all 8 of their threats can be returned via this card. Mardu Shadow is also something I'm looking at too with this card because it can return Ranger Captain Eos and a Death Shadow, and then Ranger Captain will get another Death Shadow for you. Like, so there's a lot of really unique scenarios you can use it. Like Tidehauler Scholar can return as well. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it'd be kind of cool to use, and what's the worst going to happen? It sucks, and I get rid of it. So I think it's a pretty unique card. The only time I think where it could possibly be dead is if I have nothing in my graveyard and it doesn't have that cycling mechanic that's so very important for Unearth.
You're facing an Ashiok on the opponent's side.
Yeah, exactly. I really wish this had a cycling ability on it. Even if it was like a 3-mana cycling ability, it would make it like just so much more playable in my opinion. But nonetheless, it can't hurt as a 1 of or maybe like a 2 of max. So I'm looking forward to trying that card. And yeah, overall, the set for me didn't have too much shadow support at all. I know many of you guys saw my ritual I put on Twitter to summon the shadow gods of 2017, the glory days of Grixis, and we were smited and no one answered us, and it looks like the gods fell silent. So we're kind of gonna have to figure this stuff on our own and pray that something comes out for us in the near future. So yeah, but I think this set's really cool. I'm not saying this set stinks or it's not good or I'm salty about it. Like, I think it's such an awesome set. It has tons of cool creatures. It has really unique mechanics. The companion mechanic is super cool. Mutate is really bonkers to me. I think putting like all these different types of counters like Lifelink and Death Touch and Menace is really, really very unique to me. They knocked it out of the park with the whole Godzilla altars. That's my favorite part. Like, granted, I'm salty as hell because I'm not getting anything for Shadow, but I'm going to get to play with Godzilla. And I think that's awesome. And I'm a grown man playing with Godzilla cards and a normal setting. And no one's going to think twice about it when I go say swing summon Godzilla. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I got a block or do something. So I'm not going to get any weird looks. I'm very excited to do that. Like, I get some Living End, get some new toys, like the big cyclers. I'm excited to try out. I picked up my copies of Living End for a whole whopping like $2 each. I cannot believe how much they've gone down. I remember when I first started playing Modern, Living End was like, I think maybe like $27, $28, even in like 30, 32 sometimes. Like, Living End was up there. Like, I remember people like talking in Modern videos like, oh, you need this card in a sideboard to defeat Living End. Like, now I don't think anyone even talks about it. But these huge cyclers could possibly help it, bounce back a little bit, maybe make it a little more competitive. So yeah, I like this set. From a modern standpoint, I would give it probably about like a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6 if on the low end, a 7 on the high end. No more, no less. I think they knocked it up, casually speaking. I think they knocked it out of the park with Godzilla, with the altars, the comic book showcase versions, the cool land altars, like fantastic design wise. For the shadow playability rating, I give it probably like a 2 out of 10, maybe even a 1. Like this set pretty much did nothing for Grixis Death Shadow. Pretty much nothing for 4-color and nothing for Mardu. Jund as well. So not too sure when it comes to that. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10 when it comes to Shadow playability. What about you, Jeremy? What are your final ratings and thoughts on the set?
Yeah, so to go back on the Call of the Death Dweller real quick, I think another underrated part is that Menace, because Menace combined with Tamir Battle Rage, and then the next turn, when your opponent only has a Gilded Goose or something on board, after you blocked with Death Shadow with the Death Touch counter, being able to take out Euro if they swung in or something. So that Menace is really key. Like you said, 3 mana is kind of our limit. We really tend to only play 3 mana cards if they're super powerful, like the Royal Scions, Ashiok, both Lilianas, Kolaghan's Command. We play those because they're super powerful. So we need to really experiment because, like you said, we didn't get much support. And I can't lie, I'm not entirely surprised that we didn't get a whole lot of support. This is about the only time I wish I was a Humans player because I know every set I'm probably getting something to at least toy with. But as a Death Shadow pilot, it wasn't completely surprising. Like you said, I'll probably give it like a 1 or 2 out of 10 because we have some okay cards to maybe test. Footfall Crater could be a possibility. The other card that we were talking about, the Death Dweller, could be a possibility, but we never really know. The set, visually, the set was probably one of the better ones I've seen in a while. There's been a lot of great sets. Visually, just like the artwork in this one, the excitement of all the Godzilla ones, I think that's why I would probably rate it a little bit higher than some of the other ones because, like you said, you grew up in Godzilla and then now you're seeing all these creatures come to light and seeing all these powerful abilities, and the artwork was just really insane on this one. I liked it a lot. Even like we talked about the land cycle, not really prevalent in modern, but that artwork was awesome. Like I looked at each one, I was like, wow, if I just block the words, I really love this card because the artwork's beautiful. Like I said, Godzilla just seems so awesome. All the different Godzilla ones, all the different Godzilla characters, artwork was really well done. Living End received some much needed support, which I was kind of surprised because Living End's kind of like Death Shadow. You don't get a whole lot of support. So it was really cool. Gives me a little bit of hope that maybe we'll get a little bit of support in Shadow. Overall, I'd probably give it like a 6, 7 out of 10 like you, and 1 to 2 out of 10 for Death Shadow. Overall, yeah, I like it a lot. So we'll see how some of these cards affect Modern. I don't think Mutate will be super broken to begin with, but as more cards get printed in later sets, you never know. So, which leads me to ask, Post-Ikoria, what do we think will be the top 3 decks in the format? So to start with number 3, what will you say is your third best deck in the format?
So the third best deck for me is Amulet Titan. I just think it's still a good deck. It has access to Feel the Dead, it has access to tons of ramp, it has access to blue-green cards. So that alone knocks it out of the park for me. My second deck will be Bant Snowblade. I think Stoneforge, Mystic, and Batterskull is still a very reputable play, and I think it's a very well-rounded card. And then they get access to cards like Euro and Veil of Summer on the sideboard. My number 1 pick would have to be Erosa. I think that combining the finishing power of Galvanic Blast along with the grinding power of Euro and Urza with its huge constructs, and Urza is almost like a planeswalker. It comes out and has so many abilities you can do. Even the spinning ability is relevant too. So I think Erosa is the best deck. Amulet Titan is probably the least best of the best decks, but it's hard to say right now because we don't have any huge tournaments to measure the complete meta. And then Bant is probably somewhere in the middle. So yeah, those are my top 3. What about you, Jeremy?
So for my third is going to be Dredge. I've seen Dredge just kind of tear it up. We don't, like you said, we don't have any of the face-to-face large paper tournaments to really kind of tell what our decks are, but I'm looking at the last 3 results for Dredge was an 8-0, a 7-1, and a 4-1. And Dredge won this modern super qualifier, the only deck to go undefeated throughout the entire event. And I think Dredge is really good. The new Oxyveganos has been a godsend for them. I know some people kind of questioned it at the beginning. Some people loved it, but just being able to draw 3 in quotations, being able to dredge a bunch of cards in their graveyard, feed that for Narcomoebas into prized amalgams, creeping chills, a busted card at heart, bolting you, and then I'm going to go ahead and gain that 3 life as well. I think Dredge is in a really good format, or in a really good position in this format, so I definitely think it's the 3rd best deck. Number 2, I'd say Bant Snow. I know a lot of times it's grouped together in MTG Goldfish with Bant Stoneblade, even though like I'll be like, oh wow, Bant Stoneblade did good, and then I'll open it up and I'm like, there's no Mystic. That is the example of the modern super qualifier. Bant Snow went 7-1. It says Stoneblade, but I'm looking, it's got Ice Fang, Codal, Snapcaster Mage, and Euro as their only creatures. Ban has been in a really good position whether you play Stoneforge Mystic or not. Euro has really made these decks relevant, even more relevant. So Ice Fang, Codal helps just draw a card, possibly trigger Death Touch, take out whatever's on the opponent's side of the battlefield. This was playing Teferi Time Rattler. A lot of people say Teferi Time Rattler is a pretty broken card, which I think it is. But it's such a strong card in these decks. Jason Mind Sculptor, they're playing Teferi, and then just so many strong different counter spells. Path to Exile, great against the mirror, or not the mirror, like Erosa or even the mirror. Just being able to take out the Euro on the other side. Archmage Charm, Force of Negation, Cryptic Command. Just all these powerful counter spells that I just think it makes it really powerful because they outvalue and then they just counter anything you play. And then number 1, I agree with you as well, Erosa. Erosa is definitely the best deck in the format. Euro's the best creature in the format, I would argue. These decks are just super good. Whenever I'm putting together a sideboard for my decks, I'm thinking, okay, so how do I beat Erosa? Because I would argue that most people agree that Erosa is the best deck in the format. Urza is such a good card. It was such a good card before, and then add that with Euro. Like, you're telling me I get to play Urza and Euro in the same deck, and then also do Emery to be able to bring back Mistress Bauble for free, be able to bring back Arkham's Astrolabe. Oh, you get a bunch of 1-mana creatures. I'm going to go ahead and tap this, bring back an Engineered Explosives. We're going to blow that up, by the way. I only have 4 islands on the battlefield, but I have 2 Astrolabes that I can play green, anything. So I don't know if anything will ever happen to Arkham's Astrolabe, but until it does, I think these snow permanents are probably, or snow type archetypes are probably going to be the best deck in the format.
For sure. I agree with that statement. I think that, especially with the meta, the way it is now, we don't know. No one's there to show up with a new spicy deck they've been working on all weekend to go spike this tournament. No one's there to discover a new fancy sideboard tech. We have the modern meta on MTGO and stuff like that, but to me this doesn't feel the same as the big defined meta from the big SCG opens or the big GPs. So we'll definitely have to wait and see when this nightmare is over to see where the meta shakes up, and our biggest concerns can be just 0-3 dropping with Curses Death Shadow or liquid tournaments again. But that looks like all the time we have for today, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next week.